Casey Anthony could be indicted on murder or manslaughter charges. A grand jury expected to talk about that today. Good morning, and thanks for starting your day with us. I'm Heidi Hatch.
I'm Tom Johnson. Her 3-year-old daughter, Kaylee, disappeared 4 months ago. Still no sign of her. It looks like investigators are moving ahead in their case against her. First on Fox, Alexis Brito live outside the courthouse downtown Orlando with a preview of what's sure to be a major day in this case. Hi there, Alexis.
Good morning, Tom, Heidi. It is a major day. You know, prosecutors want to have charges against Casey Anthony to be elevated to murder charges, even though they do not have a body, something that is rarely done, but it has been done in the past. Now, they are expected to present a case against Casey Anthony to members of a jury, which will decide, consequently, if there could be charges presented to her for murder or homicide. Now, right now, Casey Anthony is charged with child neglect, lying to police, and check fraud. If the charges for murder are presented against her, that child neglect charge will fall off. The reason behind that, she cannot be charged for neglect if she has already killed her daughter. That is the reasoning for that. Now, the grand jury will be hearing today from the state attorney, Lawson Lamar, and an assistant state attorney. They will be questioning more than a dozen witnesses for the 15 people that will be in the jury box. They'll be questioning sheriff deputies, FBI agents, FBI lab experts, and of course, George Anthony, which is Casey Anthony's father. Now, we have learned in the last couple of hours that Jose Baez, Casey's attorney, probably will not be able to represent Casey as the lead attorney if she is charged with murder or homicide. Why? Because he does not meet the standards set forth by attorneys in capital murder cases. Nevertheless, he will be able to be part of the legal team. We asked the Baez camp what they thought about this, and they released this statement in reference to this finding. They have said that it won't change the commitment of the Baez law firm, and they are fully prepared if an indictment is handed down to represent Miss Anthony to the fullest. Obviously, Baez does want to be part of the legal team, but as you can see, he does not meet the qualifications. In other words, he doesn't have the experience to be able to handle this type of case in a court of law. Live in Orange County, Alexis Brito, Fox 35 News.
All right, so Alexis, aren't there a bunch of questions that Mr. Baez asked the court to decide on with Casey Anthony? What's the status of those?
Yeah, you may remember last Friday, Casey Anthony's attorney, Jose Baez, did head to court with a few motions. It was 11 motions in total. 8 of those were approved. There are still 3 that weren't answered. We were waiting to get an answer to that yesterday. Nevertheless, these are the 3. One of them is to allow her to go to places of interest to search for her missing 3-year-old, and also to keep Casey's appointments private. Pretty much, maybe the reason that the judge did not rule on these yesterday is because really this would be irrelevant if she is charged with murder today, because if she is charged with murder, she can't go out on the street to look for her daughter. She'd be going back to jail. Tom?
All right, Alexis, we'll see you again in just a little while. We've gone over the nuts and bolts of this case ad nauseum. Now we want to take you inside the legalities of what Casey Anthony faces if this case goes before the grand jury as we expect today. For that, we bring in Barry Law School criminal law professor Leonard Birdsong. Professor Birdsong, thank you for being with us this morning. So first of all, tell us exactly what a grand jury is, because it's so secretive. I think a lot of people might not quite understand what it does in Florida.
Exactly. Well, a grand jury is and thank you for having me on, first of all, but a grand jury is by nature a secretive investigative body. The idea came over from England to the colonies. A grand jury looks to determine whether the crime has been committed and whether there's enough evidence to bind it over for trial. Grand juries are secret. We're not supposed to know when they meet, where they meet, and how long they meet. My suspicion is that this grand jury has been going on for some time. Grand jury investigations, and I've done a number of them in my time, usually take more than one day. We keep hearing that this has been convened on Tuesday today and that they expected an indictment. I doubt that that is really the case. Grand juries are meeting, and the prosecutors don't know when, or don't want us to know when they're meeting. Usually in the courthouse, it's secret where they meet, on what days they meet. I suspect that this may be, well, the last day of this grand jury. The father of Casey Anthony is supposed to testify today. I'm sure they put other witnesses in. One thing you should know about grand juries, they do put live witnesses in, but unlike a trial, hearsay testimony is allowed in a grand jury. It's a one-sided event. There's only a prosecutor and the grand jurors and a court reporter, and if they find that there's enough evidence that a crime has been committed and the subject, that is Casey Anthony, may have committed the crime, they can vote a true bill. That is vote to indict.
Professor Birdsong, thanks for being with us. We'll see you again at 7:30 for more on this.
7:30, the question of the day, could Casey Anthony be back behind bars soon?
Yeah, it's possible if a grand jury that meets today indicts her. First on Fox, Alexis Brito live outside the Orange County Courthouse with more. Good morning again, Alexis.
Good morning, Tom, Heidi. Well, that grand jury will convene at 8:30 this morning, so in about an hour they will be meeting. And prosecutors are expected to present a case against Casey Anthony to members of that grand jury. We're talking about 15 people there. They could decide if there is enough evidence to charge Casey Anthony with murder or homicide. Now, Anthony is currently charged with child neglect, lying to police, and check fraud. If charges for murder are filed against her, then that child neglect charge would obviously fall off. Now, the grand jury will be hearing today from State Attorney Lawson Lamar and an assistant state attorney. They will be questioning more than a dozen witnesses, which include sheriff deputies, FBI agents, FBI lab experts, and even her own father, George Anthony. Now, we have learned that Jose Baez, her attorney, probably will not be able to represent Casey as the lead attorney if she is charged with murder or homicide. The reason is because he does not meet the standards set forth by attorneys in capital murder cases. Nevertheless, Baez's office says that they will still be a part of the legal team. Another thing that is going on today, you may recall that last Friday, Casey Anthony's attorney did go to court with 11 motions that he presented to a judge to try to get him to approve. Out of those 11 motions, 3 were not approved yet. So today, that could happen. We're waiting to hear on a judge's decision on these motions, which would include allowing Casey Anthony to travel to places of interest so she can search for her daughter, 2, to keep Casey's appointments private, and 3, to preserve forensic evidence in the case that is against her. Obviously, if the grand jury decides that there is enough evidence to hold her accountable for murder or homicide, these first 2, they really would be irrelevant. Live in Orange County, Alexis Brito, Fox 35 News.
Alexis, now when Casey retained Jose Baez as her attorney, she probably wasn't too familiar with him or his qualifications. Do we know how they hooked up, if he maybe found her or whether it was she who went to him?
Actually, when she was in jail, when she was jailed the very first time, she didn't have anybody to talk to or any attorney. So she started asking inmates there who they would recommend, and that is how Jose Baez's name came up, and that was how she contacted him. Heidi?
All right, we're going to stay on top of this one. Alexis, thank you. It is 7:33 right now, and we want to know what happens exactly in a grand jury and when they convene, and what can we expect to learn today as it convenes. For those questions and much more, we turn to Professor Leonard Birdsong, a criminal law instructor at Barry Law School and a former prosecutor. Good morning, Mr. Birdsong.
Good morning. How are you, Heidi?
Good, thank you. A lot of questions as we go into this. What will happen as that grand jury convenes today? Is this a decision that will be made in a day, or will they have to meet maybe several times to come to maybe an indictment on this?
Well, let me say this. I don't have any information about this particular grand jury, but grand juries by nature grand jury is a secret investigative body. They meet several times generally. It's unusual that a grand jury would meet one day. My own belief is that this investigation has been going on for several weeks now, and probably we're at the end of it now, and probably the father is going to be the last witnesses. Grand juries are so secret, we generally don't know who sits on a grand jury, how often they meet, or where they meet. In many places, like in most courthouses, they don't even let you know where they're meeting. Some courthouses, they meet in the basement of the courthouse. And so it's a very secretive body. There are generally between 21 to 23 members of a grand jury. It takes 12 to vote a true bill. That is, they listen to the evidence, and a majority determines whether there is enough evidence to determine whether a crime has been committed and the subject of the grand jury investigation has committed the crime. If that is the fact, they will vote a true bill. If they don't feel there is enough evidence to bring it to trial, they vote not a true bill. So we will see what happens. You know, it's been said that a good prosecutor can go into the grand jury and indict a ham sandwich. I mean, it's a one-sided procedure. There's no defense attorney, there's no judge. It's basically presenting enough evidence to determine whether this person has committed a crime, enough to take it to trial. And even hearsay is allowable in a grand jury. So you don't have to have a lot of witnesses, but you have to have some.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Thank you for your insight today, Mr. Birdsong.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. For much more on this, you can always go to our website, myfoxorlando.com. We'll be covering this case throughout the day.